You're staying at Chipotle, doing the math on whether guacamole is happening today. Not whether you want it. You want it, obviously. The real question is whether you can afford it. You make $38,000 a year. On paper, that doesn't sound catastrophic. It means you earn more than roughly a third of full-time workers in America. But the guacamole is $2.75, and somehow, even that tiny decision still requires calculation. You still have to pause. You still have to check whether one small extra pushes the month too far. Now picture someone else. Same country, same age, same number of hours in a day. Last Tuesday, she saw a cheap last-minute flight to Austin and booked it immediately. No spreadsheet, no mental math, no checking her banking app. No moment of, should I really be doing this? She bought the ticket, closed the tab, and forgot about it until it was time to pack. Those two people are not living two versions of the same life. They are living in two completely different realities. And the part that should really stop you is this. The gap between them is not just luck. It's not even necessarily some massive salary difference. It's a very specific threshold, a measurable one. Researchers have actually tried to define it. Because before we talk about what different paychecks can buy, we have to talk about where people actually stand. Most people dramatically misread their place on the income ladder, and that misunderstanding leads to terrible decisions in personal finance. The median household income in America is about $83,730. That is not one high earner. That is the entire household combined. Everyone under one roof who brings in money added together. The median full-time individual worker earns around $62,000 a year. So when two people say, "We're doing fine, we make six figures together," they are usually not describing a rich lifestyle. They are describing something very close to average. Not poor, not wealthy, just near the middle. Roughly 30% of Americans live in low-income households under $56,000 a year. The core middle class runs around $75,000 to $125,000. And only a small percentage of households break past $250,000. But here's the fact that rarely gets said clearly enough in financial media. Earning six figures does not automatically mean you've escaped stress. It does not automatically mean you've mastered personal finance. It does not automatically mean you can save money, build wealth, or start serious investing. Because income alone is not the whole story. The real question is this. At what point does money start working for you instead of you constantly working for money? Let's follow one person across that entire ladder. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 29. He works in logistics operations for a regional shipping company in the suburbs of Atlanta. He makes $38,000 a year. After federal taxes, state taxes, and payroll deductions, he takes home about $2,375 a month. That's the whole board. That's all the money. Now, let's watch where it goes. Rent first, because rent always comes first. A decent one-bedroom in the Atlanta suburbs is around $1,100 a month. That's nearly half his take-home gone before he has eaten a single meal. Utilities add another $175. Marcus needs a car because suburban Atlanta is not walkable, and the jobs are not exactly lined up next to public transit. So there's $350 for a used car payment, plus another $300 for gas and insurance. Groceries on a bare-bones budget? About $370. Phone and internet? $120. Health insurance? $130. Student loan payments on income-driven repayment? $300. That brings the total to $2,845 a month. Marcus brings home $2,375. He is short $470 every single month before coffee, before birthdays, before a date, before one fun night, before one inconvenience, before one unexpected emergency. This is not bad budgeting. This is not irresponsibility. This is math refusing to cooperate. And this is what that actually feels like. It feels like scanning groceries at self-checkout while doing a silent running total in your head, then putting back the nicer shampoo because the number is getting too close. It feels like telling your friends, "I'm not really hungry," when they suggest a restaurant, because that sounds less humiliating than saying, "I genuinely cannot afford to eat out right now." It feels like wondering whether your car can survive one more week without an oil change, because $85 is not a small number when you are already underwater. And the system has a very specific relationship with people like Marcus. Overdraft fees hit the people who can't maintain a balance. Payday lenders charge outrageous rates to people who cannot wait 2 weeks. Rent-to-own stores extract double the price from people who cannot pay up front. In America, the less money you have, the more expensive everything becomes. That is not a flaw in the system. For this income tier, that is the system. Now, let's say Marcus gets a meaningful promotion 5 years later. He now earns $65,000 a year. His monthly take-home rises to about $4,252. Finally, the budget can technically balance. But life rises with income. Rent creeps up to $1,350 because he can now afford something slightly better. The car payment becomes $400 for something more reliable. Gas and insurance hit $330. Groceries move up to $430 because he is no longer operating at pure survival level. Student loans are still there at $400. Health insurance is $135. Phone and internet are $125. And now Marcus finally has room for some kind of life. A gym membership, an occasional meal out, maybe one streaming service he actually watches. Call that another $250. Total spending, $3,610. Remaining, $642. That sounds decent until you realize what real stability actually requires. If Marcus contributes 6% to his 401k to capture the employer match, about $325 disappears there. Now he has roughly $317 a month left. That means building even a modest emergency fund takes over a year, assuming absolutely nothing goes wrong. And of course, something always goes wrong. This is the fragile middle. This is where a lot of people think they've made it, when really they've just upgraded from drowning to treading water. At $65,000, Marcus can breathe, but only until the check engine light comes on. He can feel proud that he's no longer overdrafting, while knowing deep down that one medical bill, one missed paycheck, one car repair, one bad month can reset everything. That's not wealth. That's temporary balance. And if you care about personal finance, this is one of the hardest truths to accept. Being able to pay your bills is not the same thing as being financially safe. Having a little left over is not the same thing as being able to save money consistently. And having good intentions is not the same thing as having enough margin to begin investing for the future. Now, Marcus changes companies, negotiates harder, and reaches the milestone everyone treats like a finish line: $100,000 a year. 6 figures. His take-home pay is about $6,158 a month. Now, pause for a second, because this part matters. Marcus got a $35,000 raise, but after taxes, payroll deductions, and everything else, that massive raise translates into something like $1,900 to $2,000 more per month in actual usable money. That is what a $35,000 raise really looks like in real life. Now the budget looks better. A decent 2-bedroom apartment or starter home in a mid-cost city costs about $1,800. Utilities are $225. Car payment, $500. Gas and insurance, $350. Better groceries, $465. Phone and internet, $130. Health insurance, $150. Student loans, $450. And a real adult life, gym, dining out, an occasional weekend trip, maybe $500. That totals about $4,570. Marcus has around $1,588 left. If he contributes 10% to his 401k, he still has roughly $755 per month available. Now, an emergency fund can be built in under a year. A surprise expense is no longer an automatic crisis. A bad month no longer immediately becomes a disaster. And this is what $100,000 really unlocks. For the first time in a long time, Marcus can wake up in the morning and not think about money first. That is not a small luxury. That is the product. The absence of financial dread is a form of wealth. A lot of people think wealth is about status or luxury or a nicer car. But one of the first real signs of financial progress is much quieter than that. It's the ability to go through an ordinary Tuesday without your brain constantly running cost calculations in the background. But Marcus is still not rich, not even close. If he wanted to fully max out his 401k, that would take nearly $2,000 a month. His available surplus after core spending is less than that. So he still cannot do everything at once. He cannot fully maximize retirement investing, save aggressively, and fund every other goal at the same time. Something still has to give. And if Marcus lived in Seattle, Denver, or Washington, D.C., that housing cost could be much higher, and the whole budget gets tight again. So a $100,000 salary is not freedom. It is breathing room. It is the first level where the machine stops crushing you every single day. Then Marcus lands a senior role. Now he earns $150,000 a year. Take-home pay comes to around $8,830 a month. And finally, the math starts to become less cruel. Housing on a proper home, $2,200. Utilities, $275. Car payment, $600. Gas and insurance, $385. Good groceries, $500. Phone and internet, $140. Health insurance, $160. Student loans, $450. Real discretionary spending, vacations, dinners, the full version of adult life, $1,000. Total, $5,710. Remaining, $3,120 every month. Now Marcus can max out his 401k, fund a backdoor Roth IRA, and still have money left for taxable investing. He can build a 6-month emergency fund in less than 5 months. He can handle shocks. He can say yes to opportunities. He can stop making every decision through the lens of scarcity. And most importantly, his internal question changes. It is no longer, can I afford this? It becomes, do I actually want this? That is not a subtle shift. That is the whole game. Because serious investing does not begin when you become a genius. It begins when you finally have enough margin for your money to survive long enough to multiply. That is the secret. That is why so much personal finance advice feels useless to people on lower incomes. You can lecture someone all day about discipline, but discipline cannot create margin where the math itself does not allow any. At $35,000, every dollar Marcus earns gets swallowed. At $65,000, some dollars survive for a moment. At $100,000, he can finally save money without one setback destroying the plan. At $150,000, his dollars can finally have children. That is compounding. That is investing. And that is where the game changes. For many households, the real tipping point appears somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, depending on where they live. Below that, the system often runs you. Above that, you begin to have a real chance to run the system. But even then, the paycheck alone is not enough. Because there is another trap waiting: lifestyle inflation. Goldman Sachs found something deeply revealing. Among households earning $200,000 to $300,000, only a small share live paycheck to paycheck. That seems to be the stability sweet spot. But in households earning $300,000 to $500,000, that rate jumps sharply again. And among households earning over $500,000, the paycheck-to-paycheck rate looks shockingly similar to households earning under $50,000. Think about that. A person making $500,000 a year can feel just as financially squeezed as someone making $45,000. Not because the money is the same, because the gap disappears in both cases. At $45,000, you spend everything because you have to. At $500,000, you can spend everything because your lifestyle quietly expands until excess becomes normal. A $9,000 mortgage becomes reasonable. Private school becomes non-negotiable. Luxury leases become just how people at this level live. Business class flights become the standard. The paycheck gets bigger. The margin doesn't have to. That is why the real variable is never just income. It is the distance between what comes in and what is locked into going out. And that gap is where all financial power lives. That gap is where you save money. That gap is where investing begins. That gap is where personal finance stops being theory and starts becoming freedom. Because real wealth is not just about earning more. It is about protecting the space between income and obligation, then consistently directing that space into boring, automatic investing over years and decades. That is how people build money while they sleep. Not through brilliance, not through hype, not through lottery tickets, through margin, structure, and time. So here is what all of this adds up to. The threshold is not a destination. It is a doorway. Below a certain income, the game is brutally hard because fixed costs consume nearly everything, and no amount of motivational personal finance content can fully fix that. The math simply does not cooperate. Above that threshold, usually somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000 in household income, depending on location, something changes. You finally have enough room to save money. You finally have enough room to start meaningful investing. You finally have enough room for time to do the heavy lifting. But after that, the system is not the only threat. You are. Because once your income rises, the danger becomes invisible. Not poverty, but expansion. Not shortage, but normalization. Not survival spending, but lifestyle inflation disguised as success. So before you close this tab, do one thing. Open your bank account. Right now. Add up your fixed costs: rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance, debt, subscriptions, everything that leaves your account, whether you like it or not. Then compare that number to your monthly take-home pay. The gap between those two numbers is the only financial number that really matters. Everything else, your salary, your title, the image of success, the house, the car, is mostly scenery. If that number made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where change begins. If that number surprised you in a good way, then you may already be in a stronger position than you realized. Because the people who build real wealth are not always the people who earn the most. They are the people who understand early that financial security is not a salary, it is a structure. And a good structure, protected long enough, becomes freedom. Marcus started with guacamole math. The question is, What are you starting with? And what are you going to build from there?